Welcome, friends. Today's topic is Pythagoras. Next Sunday's topic, well, we're going to have a round table on questions and answers, where we will have prepared questions, and also anyone else in the group who has a question, we can do some research on it right here at the lodge and figure out what the answer is. Theosophy is a name for the ancient wisdom brought to us from time to time as conditions permit. The message of the 19th century was brought to us by H.P. Blavatsky as the mouthpiece of the masters of wisdom. Pure Theosophy is their program designed to help us better understand how each of us fits into nature's grand plan of propelling all of life forward up to the lighting of the mind at the human level. Thereafter, forward or backward propulsion depends on our self-induced and self-devised efforts, individually and collectively, to prepare ourselves to enter the path to become chelas and masters of wisdom. HPB and her staunch colleague, William Q. Judge, showed us this path in writings they left for us. Many of them are behind me here. We all have this potential of ever becoming, within ourselves, the first step being to start to find it within ourselves. The declaration that we have here at the United Lodge of Theosophists. The policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds at the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists wherever and however situated, the similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. The associates who choose to do so may sign the following form: being in sympathy with the purposes of this lodge as set forth in its declaration, I hereby record my desire to be enrolled as an associate, it being understood that such association calls for no obligation on my part other than which I myself determine. The reading for today is from the Voice of the Silence, starting here on page 38. Act now for them today, and they will act for thee tomorrow. 'Tis from the bud of renunciation of the self that springeth the sweet fruit of final liberation. To perish, doomed is he who out of fear of Mara refrains from helping man, lest he should act for self. The pilgrim who would cool his weary limbs in running waters, yet dares not plunge for terror of the stream, risks to succumb from heat. Inaction based on selfish fear can bear but evil fruit. The selfish devotee lives to no purpose. The man who does not go through his appointed work in life has lived in vain. Follow the wheel of life. Follow the wheel of duty to race and kin, to friend and foe, and close thy mind to pleasures as to pain. Exhaust the law of karmic retribution. Gain cities for thy future birth. If sun thou canst not be, then be the humble planet. If thou art debarred from flaming like the noonday sun upon the snow-capped mount of purity eternal, then choose, O neophyte, a humbler course. Point out the way, however dimly and lost among the host, as does the evening star to those who tread their path in darkness. Behold Migmar, as his crimson veils his eye sweeps over slumbering earth. Behold the fiery aura of his hand, of Lagpa, extended in protecting love over the heads of his ascetics. Both are now servants of, left in his absence, silent watchers in the night. Yet both in Kalpa's past were bright Niyamis, and may in future days again become two sons. Such are the falls and rises of the karmic law in nature. Be, O Anu, like them. Give light and comfort to the toiling pilgrim, and seek out him who knows still less than thou, who in his wretched desolation sits starving for the bread of wisdom and the bread which feeds the shadow, without a teacher, hope, or consolation, and let him hear the law. And now for today's talk on Pythagoras.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome, friends. Why should we talk about Pythagoras? Well, you all know that the sacred decade, Pythagorean science of numbers, come from him, plus the mystery schools. We're talking about a Greek island called Samos, which is very close to the Turkish border, on the western side, on the Aegean Sea. This is the birthplace of Pythagoras. His parents, his father especially, was a wealthy merchant, and they went to Delphi to consult the oracle, and they were told that they were going to have a son who would be virtuous and with great wisdom. And of course, it was true, it did come true. On their way back to Samos, his mother gave him birth in Phoenicia, in Sidon. And we learn from Iamblichus that in his childhood, Pythagoras showed a tremendous depth of wisdom. And we find him at 18 years of age completing whatever the island could offer in cultivation of his great gifts. And he was looking around to see how else, or what else he's going to do in order to expand his knowledge bases. And we know that he was 56 years old. From 18 to 56, he was learning. That's a tremendous 38 years, from 56 years, he came back to home after his travels and learning. So, 38 years of learning, that's quite a long time. So at 18 he decided to expand his basis of knowledge, and he had heard of Anaximander and Thales, so he went to them. Thales conversed with Pythagoras and recognized the quality of his mind and told him to go to Egypt, and so he did. He left Miletus and went to Sidon, and from there he went to Egypt and put himself under the same teachers that had instructed Thales. So we see him initiated into the Egyptian mysteries, and at this time Cambyses invaded Egypt. We're talking about the Persian dictator, and so we find him prisoner in Babylon under his regime. But Pythagoras is not one who's going to give in to any environmental pressure. We see him studying for 12 years with the Magi in the Chaldean mysteries. Leaving Babylon at the end of it, he goes to Persia and from there to India to continue his education in the East and imbibe the source of the original teachings from that center. After that time, at that time we're talking about 6th century BC. Of course, he's too late for the Buddha's impartment of knowledge in that sector, but the area was still under tremendous influence of the Buddha, even though he was too late to meet him in person. Nevertheless, he is fortunate enough to gain from that the spread of knowledge by Buddha. So he went to India as a student, but he left as a teacher, and in that country he's still known as Yavanacharya, the Ionian teacher, the Greek teacher, Ionian islands constituting the Greek islands at that time. So he's 56 years old when he finally returns to his native land, Samos. Of course, during this time, he studied tremendously, and we see him being not just initiated into the Chaldean mysteries, but he's also initiated into the mysteries of Sidon at Tyre. So he looks around on Samos and finds that the island has been crushed and all of the schools have been ruined by Cambyses. And he was looking around for students to whom he can impart this knowledge he brought with him. But he can't find even a single student who is interested in his teachings. One day he's in the gymnasium and he sees this student who looked poorly dressed. He's exercising in there, and they converse, and Pythagoras then convinces him to study geometry under his instruction and offers to pay him every time he solves a problem. What a way to introduce knowledge. Anyway, so eventually the student becomes very interested in geometry and tells him, don't pay me any reward anymore, I will study it on my own. And this is the student that is the most faithful to Pythagoras for the rest of the duration. So then he's looking around to find a place where he can go to disseminate this knowledge, and he chooses Crotona. And Crotona is in Italy. It is right here in the boot Gulf of Taranto is the sea that surrounds it. Why did he choose that? Because he finds that the people of that area are forward-thinking. Their rules are very generous to the communities arising in those areas, and they're just in their law. The law is just. So he goes there and immediately visits the gymnasium and talks to the young men there, who then go home and impart what he said to them to their parents. And then so he's invited to give a talk to the Senate of Crotona, which he does. And then the Senate decides to build a school for him, which then becomes not just a training for philosophy, but also moral training. It becomes an academy of science and actually a small model city. The school is situated high on a hill, and it looks onto the Gulf. So even though the mystery schools are kind of on the way out, declining in influence, he builds his school in the same pattern of the mystery schools. But there is no outside sign as to any secrecy going on in it, except there's a statue of Hermes giving access to the inner part of the school, and on it it says, "Let no profane enter here," on its pedestal. So the students that come there are probationers for 3 years, and they're closely watched by Pythagoras. He is mixing with them in their daily workouts, in their walks, in the gym, and he's scrutinizing them as to the suitability to enter the school. And after that, the moral nature of the student is tested by being praised or criticized, and the reaction to it is considered. And then his intellectual capacity is tested. Rapidity of his thought, accuracy of his memory, power of concentration, and particularly use of intuition. And after the 3-year probation period, those who are accepted become probationary students for the next 5 years, and during this period they keep absolute silence. At the end of it, if they are successful in completing the 5 years, they're then accepted into the school. Okay, so how does he teach? By the way, during those 8 years, the probationary period, no one actually meets him in person, and they cannot mention his name. But at the end of the 8 years, the student meets him face to face, and he's imparted knowledge from Pythagoras to the student. His method is obvious as is today. Discipline and attitude, intent. Why? Because he's going to teach them nature's hidden secrets. And we have the secret doctrine today for the same purpose. Nature's hidden secrets. He begins his instructions by establishing certain universal principles, proceeding from generals to particulars, and then from particulars to the general. But the general is very important because irrespective of whatever particular science he's teaching, he applies the same formula to it. And that is one, evolving and pervading the many. This is commonly known as the doctrine of emanations. Pythagoras called it the science of numbers. So the secret doctrine talks about emanations, which is exactly the same methodology as used by Pythagoras. He tells his students that this science of occultism was given to the human race, the third race, by divine instructors. To the Greeks, it is Orpheus that teaches it. And so while the mysteries are starting to degenerate, Pythagoras institutes this teaching in his school, preserving under the name of philosophy the ancient science. And of course, we have Plato following him that imparts exactly the same philosophy. The greatest good that was ever imparted to men then comes from the mystery schools, which is the philosophy that they impart. And we need to know that the word was coined, philosophy. Philosophy. So the basic knowledge is philosophical. In the life of Pythagoras, Pythagoras, by the way, did not write anything down. Everything that we have, all of the fragments, are given to us by his students. Umbilicus repeats the statement of Plato that the study of the science of numbers tends to awaken that organ in the brain which the ancients described as the eye of wisdom, and today we call it the pineal gland. Plato in the Republic, Book 7, says, the soul, through these disciplines, has an organ purified and enlightened, an organ better worth saving than 10,000 corporeal eyes, since truth becomes visible through this element. In the 7th book of the Republic, Plato indicated the possibilities lying behind the knowledge of numbers. He would make it compulsory for those who manage the affairs of the state to study mathematics, not in a common way, but till by intelligence itself they arrive at the survey of the nature of numbers. So we're talking about not digits here, but self-moving numbers. Numbers, not digits. Like when we use money to buy and sell stuff, that kind of stuff. So, Pythagorean student approached the science of mathematics from the universal viewpoint. Applying mathematics to both macrocosm and microcosm, he was able to understand the secrets of evolution to the minutest details. Quoting from the Neo-Pythagorean moderators, Porphyry says that numerals of Pythagoras were hieroglyphic symbols by means whereof he explained ideas concerning the nature of things or the origin of the universe. Plato, summarizing the Pythagorean formula, says, deity geometrizes, the universe evolves from within outward. The universe evolves within outwards, as does the human soul. So that's the universal principle we're starting. And the way he explains it is that there's a point from which radiation equal in all directions begins, establishing a circumference or a sphere within which all of the activities of the point are confined. So what does the secret doctrine start with? Boundless, and as soon as we put the point in it, that's indicative of the activity starting to take place. And don't please look at my, maybe it's not in its center exactly, maybe it's here. So that point is indicative of the radiation, which starts at the beginning of the Manvantara and then carries it forward. The point, when it is extended horizontally, becomes a diameter, dividing the sphere into positive and negative hemispheres. This is the basis of action and reaction, and you have all studied this in mathematics. Positive, negative. And when this one comes through, then the cross has entered into the circle. So that radiation then goes in all different directions. And if we read the Gita, the 11th chapter, we see that Krishna is explaining vital geometry of his divine form in that chapter, if you understand what he's getting at, representing the powers and elements that actually go into making the universe. So Pythagoras described this indivisibility as unity. Unity. And it lies behind all manifestation. And he says we consider that as no number. And the stanzas of the Zan in the Secret Doctrine expresses it this way: there is neither first nor last, for all is one. Number issued from no number. The plane above, therefore, can be indicated only by the knot or circle, which Pythagoras said is the most appropriate symbol of divinity. On the plane below, the monad or first number appears. From this number, the geometry of the universe emerges. Pythagoras called the monad or one the first odd and therefore divine number. It is through the misrepresentation or misinterpretation of the Pythagorean monad that the various personal gods of the different religions arose. So, if we don't understand that unity, if we do not understand the monad and what comes afterwards, this is where the mistake lies with all of the exoteric religions of the world today. So let's see what he says. In the phenomenal world, the monad becomes the apex or the manifested equilateral triangle or the father. The left line of the triangle is representing the duat or mother. This represents the origin of all the contrasts in nature, the point at which the road of good and evil bifurcate. This being the case, the Pythagoreans are said to have disliked the binary, considering the number 2 as representation of the law of polarity. So, 1, polarity, 2. And they did not like 2. They liked 1. And the apex of the triangle, this is equilateral. Don't please look at mine. This represents the father. The left line, mother, and the 2 representing polarity. The right line of the triangle represents the sun, described in the ancient cosmogony as one with the apex or father. The line at the base of the triangle stands for a universal plane of productive nature. Productive nature. So in that, father, mother, and son are unified, and the phenomenal plane comes into being after the supersensuous world, which is represented by the apex or the father. The triangle, he says, is the most profound of all geometrical symbols. As a cosmic symbol representing the higher trinity of the universe, it became the root of the word deity, because the Greeks call the letter D, delta, the vehicle of the unknown deity. And of course, they wrote the word Zeus with a delta, from which came the Latin Deus, God. Triangle is also a basic form in nature. When we look at the molecules of salt deposits, when they start becoming solid, they assume the shape of a triangle. The flame is triangular. The pyramid, coming from the Greek pyre or fire, and also the pine, one of the oldest primitive tree in nature, after the Ferrian period, is in geometrical shape a triangle. The Pythagoreans call the number 4 the key bearer of nature. As a cosmic symbol, it represents the universe as chaotic matter before being informed by spirit. The cross made by the interaction of the vertical line of the spirit and the horizontal of matter represents a spiritual man crucified in the flesh, while the 4-pointed star is a symbol of the animal kingdom. Represents the animal kingdom. I didn't put anything else on the higher triad, which is a triangle, because we go over that quite a bit. Number 4 is representative of the animal kingdom. 5-pointed, the star, is the pentacle, the symbol of man, not only of the physical man with his 4 limbs and head, but also of the conscious thinking man, whose 5th principle is manas. Okay, I'm sorry, those of you who are not familiar with the terminology probably are a little bit left out, and it's one of those talks. 5 is the pentagon, and if you look at a man, well, there is his head with his 2 arms and 2 legs. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it's not just that. When you look at the principles in men today, there are 7, and the 5th is the mind. So it actually forms part of the higher triad, because we call this Atma in men, or spirit, Buddhi, or spiritual discrimination, and this is mind here, or manas. So this is the higher triad, and with the 4 other constituent parts, it makes it 7, which then becomes the symbol of men. Pythagoreans associated number 5 with the element ether. It's not the ether of science. It's this ether that HPB writes this way with an A-N-E-T-H-E-R. It's not the regular ether, because that's the lowest sub-level of this ether, the one that science talks about. And they call number 5 the beam of balance, suggesting power of choice and perhaps the final moment of choice, because there is such a thing that comes to each human soul, whether you're going to go to the left side or you're going to go to the right side. That choice does come. It's internal to each human soul, and HPB tells us that this is not a one-step choice most of the time, that all of the choices we are making every day as we go through life are indicative of as to where we are going towards. So that final choice that we must make at that moment comes from all of the other moments we have lived. So we need to be very cautious and very aware as to what we are doing, is what we are reminded of here. The number 6 illustrates the 6 directions of extension of all solid bodies. The interlaced triangles pictures this union of spirit and matter, male and female, very succinctly. The Pythagoreans considered this number as sacred to Venus, since the union of the two sexes and the spagherization of matter by triads are necessary to develop the generative force, which is inherent in all bodies. Pythagoras called the 7 a perfect number. Perfect number. Making it the basis for the music of the spheres. Regarding 7 as a compound of 3 and 4, he gave a twofold account of its meaning. On the nominal plane, the triangle is father, mother, son, or a spirit, while the quaternary represents the ideal root of all material things. Applied to man, the triangle represents his higher 3 principles, which we put on the board. Applied to man, the triangle shows that we are immortal and changeless, while the quaternary refers to the 4 lower principles, which are unstable and in flux. What are lower principles? Obviously the physical body, the astral body, the model on which it is built, Jiva, which is the life principle, and our passions and desires, Kama. So we need to remember that these are in fluctuation because they are constantly changing. 7 not only governs the periodicity of the phenomena of life on the physical plane, but also dominate the series of the chemical elements, as well as the world of sound and color, as shown by the spectroscope. Pythagoreans call the number 8 justice. In that symbol, we find an expression of the eternal spiral motion of cycles, regular inbreathing and outbreathing of the great breath. They call the number 9 ocean and the horizon, as all numbers are comprehended by and resolved within it. And in the Ocean of Theosophy, Mr. Judge gives a list of the cycles. I should have marked one. I didn't bring mine. Would you please look and see if you can find it? Thank you. And I'll show it on the board when we find the numbers. That it's on page 125. We shall observe that all of the figures may be resolved into the number 9. In other words, what does that mean? It repeats itself. Repeats. HPB has an article, she calls number 9 pernicious. Pernicious. Because it repeats itself. 10 or decad brings all of these digits back to unity, ending the table. Both macrocosm and microcosm, the 3 higher numbers of the decad, stand for the invisible and metaphysical world, while the lower 7 refer to the realm of physical phenomena. And I think we'll stop it here. I didn't get time to talk about the tetractys, which the Pythagoreans represented in this form. It's a triangle, in other words. Number 10, if you add the dots together, it becomes a 10, and that is the tetractys. HPB has a whole section in the Secret Doctrine about it, in Secret Doctrine on page 612. Iamblichus tells us the Pythagorean tetractys had 11 forms, each one applying to some one particular phase of cosmic or terrestrial life. So, to finish it with, Pythagoras applied the science of number to music, giving the Western world the mathematical basis of its present musical system. The abstract circle of music is sound, the mathematical point within the circle from which the music of our earth emerges is the tone of nature. And the tone of nature is Fa. Tone of nature. And it is called Kung, K-U-N-G, by the Chinese. The line of music derived from the ratio 2:3 is what is now called the perfect fifth. The rotation of this line forms a circle of fifths, which gives the basis of all key relationships. And now we'll answer your questions. Yes?
So much knowledge, 6th century BC, it gels together, and he taught going internal to external to understand that knowledge, because we all have it within us.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like, we're talking about cycles, we've gone down a lot since then in our understanding of the world. Why that? We're supposed to be heading back up to spirituality.
We're talking about 2,500 years, and HPV came for that cycle, did she not? Okay. So you have to think about the humanity's presence at that time and what it has gone through since then. As you know, HPV told us that all of the cycles are necessary for our development. What she did tell us is that we don't have to get so attached and immersed into it that we cannot go through it. So what happened in the 2500 years is we became more materialistic. And as a result of being more materialized, we became materialistic. So, what happens in this case when we become materialistic? The higher triad is hidden. Why? Because the lower, mind. The mind is very important in understanding this philosophy. There is one mind. We had done it this way. Atma, or spirit. We put the English this time. Buddhi, or spiritual soul. Here. Soul, or spiritual discernment. And here is manas, or mind. And we said it weds the higher to the lower. And we gave the lower quaternary as physical body, astral body, jiva, or life principle, and the lower mind conjoined with the passions. And this is what links the higher to the lower quaternary. Without that principle, human beings could not exist in a physical body on earth. It's the mind that makes the upper and lower join together. However, when it is in the body, it functions in two different ways. The lower belongs here. Lower belongs to the quaternary, and the higher belongs to the triad. Oh, this is not very good. Sorry. Okay. Lower mind. What do we call that? Kamamanas. It is hyphenated because it's joined to our passions and desires. Humanity functions in this part here. But the intention for the future generations is that they function in the higher mind. Why? Because we are going to need it. It's going to be a necessity for us to go forward with. And we read at the beginning when we introduced Pythagoras' philosophy and followed it with Plato's, that little gland called the pineal gland has to be activated in order for our higher mind and our higher levels of consciousness to be able to influence the lower. So the pineal gland, this is an E, is necessary for the evolutionary process for us to go further. It's a natural process. We have it, but what did she tell us in the Secret Doctrine? It's petrified. In other words, it does its automatic duty, but we cannot use it consciously to direct its force. And that is what the mystery schools did. They helped the students going through 8 years of probationary period, 5 years of which were totally silent, to actually learn to control the lower quaternary and be able to use the higher mind in conjunction with Buddhi in their daily activities. And that is the training. Today, what do you think this philosophy does for us? Exactly the same thing. HPB says her main focus in giving this philosophy out was not just to impart information to us, which is necessary, but also through that struggle of understanding it, to initiate that process of activating the pineal gland, intuition. Pineal gland and intuition go together. There's a tremendous explanation about it in the Secret Doctrine. So, we have gone through the material process. We have now reached a point where the human mind is very intelligent. But intelligence, she says, does not give us this opportunity here. Intellectual mind is co-joined to the passions and desires in the human body. What we need to do is learn to control our personal desires and direct them towards altruistic desires. That has to come first. Personal. Now we have to go towards altruistic, which is impersonal. Impersonal. So, we want to know the masters and where they are. What do they tell us? They are the best philanthropists around. They want to see us acting in the same manner. Service. Service to humanity has to become to the forefront of our daily activity. This is not a one-step way. They tell us that at first, don't expect great things from ourselves, but slowly move in that direction. So that is what we have to do.
When we were talking about number 3, you drew the triangle and put the father, and then you talked about mother and son. So we can apply that to this triangle that we have here, can we not? The higher triad, and the way we explain it in Theosophy, it's exactly the same, it has the same meaning then, right? So Atma corresponds to father, Buddhi would be the left.
But we're talking about cosmical principles in that case, not human principles. You're talking about the human principle. Of course they correlate, but they're not the same. Because the human principle and the universal principle is not the same. The human principle is individualized, the cosmic principle is universal, it's everywhere. You have to remember that. So we're talking about at the beginning the creative force of the logoic center or logoic light initiating that process where it's going to come from the metaphysical sphere into manifestation. And Pythagoras is explaining how that takes place with that system. The apex is the father, right? On one side is the mother, the other side is what? The son. The sun is with the apex because it represents the spiritual aspect of the universe within itself. A mother represents the material side of nature, matter. Okay? And so when all that 3 is co-joined in this quaternary, only then can it manifest. Without which it cannot do so, because it requires the more differentiated aspect of the mind to exhibit itself through the physical body. So the universe has a physical body too. It's our earth is solidified. It evolves from inside out. HPB says it has its own region. She doesn't tell us who it is or what it is, but she only says that it is, I think, subservient to the sacred planets. So this is how we have to look at it, that we are going through this, but she says we have become enmeshed into it. Rather than going through, using it appropriately, and going towards a spirituality, humanity has become enmeshed into it. And what has happened, she said, is that we have forgotten altogether what this triad stands for, because the lower mind, she says, assumes the position of sum total. Sum total. Sum total. And does not allow the higher to have any influence of any kind in our daily activity, unless, she says, we consciously invite it in at this time. Eventually, she says, it becomes smoother and more facilitated as we get used to it, but at the beginning it has to be done by conscious effort. And so that's why it seems like we're going backwards, because rather than going through this phase of material life, we have become enmeshed in it. And she says on one side we have a skepticism, and on the other side of the coin, people are after money, position, and power. And she says those things have absolutely no value in this philosophy. They're obstacles in your way, and you need to make yourself nothing. Just like this, no thing. Because we are no thing. We're not material is what that means, no thing. We are spiritual entities occupying a material body, but we have become so enmeshed, we look in the mirror and we think this is who we are. It's a natural process we have to go through, but we don't have to get enmeshed into it. Those minds who perceive this truth move in the other direction by choice, by effort.
Were you trying to find the cycles, the numbers related to cycles?
Yeah.
If you want to.
Maybe we take a picture of it. Well, maybe.
Sure, I can take it, but did you want to talk about it, or?
No, I just wanted to show that if you add these numbers, they all end with nines. HPV says 9 repeats itself, and that's what it is. It's a pernicious number. It repeats itself, that's all. I wanted to show the numbers to, oh, maybe you want to take a picture of it so that people can actually see it. Yeah, yeah, yes.
Science, and we can look at the brain and see the pineal gland, but
It's in the inner
there's
brain.
virtually no explanation of it in science, if I understand it correctly. He talked about it as a kind of like a grain of sand, maybe.
Well, that's what it looks like when it is solidified, probably at the end. Who knows how it looks like in real life when it is functional. You know, I mean, when you think about who or what we are, that we're really light energy, what do you think that center is? It obviously has luminosity in it to some degree. This student doesn't know. I'm not a biologist. I have never looked at one.
From this student's research, there's been great strides. I think there's lots of books written about the pineal gland and other molecules associated with it, and also again, from what I've seen, the temples and the churches that have been built over centuries, they are built on the human body as a template, and then it shows the altar is usually the pineal gland. So of course the people who built the churches were mostly associated with mystery schools, and I'm sure they were aware of this knowledge, and that's how they built it from the student's observation.
I have not seen it.
Makes sense.
I have not seen it. HPV writes, I think it's in the Secret Doctrine, as to what the altar represents, and I did not see that in it, but it doesn't mean it isn't.
It's a visual. And
she was talking about the Jewish system, the altar, and Mr. Judge has an article about killing the snake's blood or something like that, and it talks about the altar in that article, but this student has never seen it linked to it.
Okay.
Yep.
It's also this student's understanding that starting with Judaism is we started deteriorating into materiality. So that may be one reason why we wouldn't have seen that when we studied Judaism.
Well, I think it's in the Secret Doctrine, and she says that it was a very unwise decision for the Christian religion to be based on the Kabbalistic system. Not only that the real Kabbalistic system was not given to the Christians, because it's a secret science. The real Kabbalah is a secret. It's only divulged from mouth to ear. And not only that, she says it doesn't exist anymore, that the true core of it had been lost. But what was given to Christianity was the external expression of it, which then, of course, does not express the truth. And it is very unfortunate, HPB says, that such a system should be adopted and given to the West as the truth, because it isn't based on it. Jehovah, she says, is not the ultimate, but it's a tribal God for the Jewish nation. But Jesus also said he came to that nation. He did not come to the whole world. So,
And he came because it was needed at the time.
at the time he came to the Jewish nation to correct what was gone wrong with them, nothing else. And that is what is written in the Secret Doctrine, that Jewish nation, Jesus belongs to them, and that what was given to the Christian nations is not the truth. And it was very unfortunate that that system was adopted as such.
Okay. Any remarks closing?
Thank you.